Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Studio. I'm your host, Lynn Weaver, and the program is brought to you by Davis Media Access and broadcast on Davis Community Television. That's Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T UVerse 99. We're also online at davismedia.org, so log on and check us out. Today's topic is the growing momentum to stop, or rather to ban, fracking in California. And we'll also review the award-winning documentary titled Greedy Lying Bastard, showing at the Varsity in Davis to mark Earth Day. My guests today are Mary Sue. She's a physician and the founder of Take Back Our Democracy, a group speaking up for people's rights over corporate greed, or should I say corporate interests, perhaps. And also we have Dr. Seth Shunkoff, a PhD and MPH, Executive Director of Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy, and an environmental researcher at UC Berkeley. And joining us by phone is R.L. Miller, an attorney from Ventura County, on the executive board of the California Democratic Party's Environmental Caucus, and a delegate to the Democratic Convention meeting this month in Sacramento. Welcome all. Thank you very much for joining our program.
Thank you.
Mary, on Earth Day, the Varsity in Davis is going to show the award-winning documentary, Greedy Lying Bastards. And you, as a physician and the founder of Take Back Our Democracy, is promoting this event. Why?
Hi, Lynn. Thanks for inviting us.
You're very welcome.
Well, our group, Take Back Our Democracy, is very concerned with the undue influence of corporate interests on our government. We started really with the Citizens United ruling by the Supreme Court, which was just over 3 years ago. And we've stayed together. We've worked primarily with public citizens to bring attention to this very undemocratic decision by the court, and we'd like to see a constitutional amendment to reverse it. So an example of what corporate money can do is exemplified by the Coke Industries. It's a huge conglomerate. Its major focus is petroleum refining. Last year alone, they spent over $16 billion to influence and buy elections. This is not democracy for and by the people, and if we let it continue, we will lose our voice and no longer live in a democracy, but an oligarchy or a plutocracy. So this film, Greedy Lying Bastards, is a very eye-catching documentary which will highlight, entertain, and educate on just what money does. In the Koch brothers case in this documentary, they are befuddling the public with lies about global warming. And this is disastrous because we need to have just the facts, please. And it clearly states global warming. So they are impeding progress. They are keeping us on old century fossil fuels and delaying the development of renewable energies because they don't make money doing good stuff. Sorry, they don't.
This is definitely a very powerful documentary. And what we're going to do is we're going to watch the trailer. And this, I might add, this is directed by Craig Scott Rosenbrough. And it has been produced sometime last year, I believe.
Yes.
And it basically tries to condemn the fact that the oil industry are downplaying and even lying the fact that global warming is occurring. So let's take a look at this trailer, and then we can talk about it for a little bit.
Sorry, it's not going through.
Okay, well, that doesn't surprise me, but Paul, if you could leave a message for me and get that to him, I'd appreciate it. Just one word.
Okay, well, it seems that we're having
You
some
ready for the
problem
word?
viewing the...
It's help.
They have inordinate power. They're almost like nations to themselves.
This is a threat.
You need to be charged with a crime!
They are in the business of selling doubt.
They wrote a check, and one of the most prominent environmental activists in the world is dead.
The White House appointed an oil industry lobbyist as chief of staff at the Council on Environmental Quality.
I finally just had to resign in protest.
Today we're announcing the expansion of offshore oil and gas exploration.
Drill, baby, drill.
Global warming is a hoax.
So I see no need to take any action at this time.
VP said, let's put a price on a person's head.
I just want this never to happen to another father.
Very powerful images there. Leo Hickman of The Guardian called it provocative, frank, and impossible to ignore. And I think it's a very good definition of what this documentary is saying to us. Mary, I believe there is a special showing scheduled on April 27th in Davis. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, exactly. So this is Earth Day. We're going to mark it with a special showing. It will be, the movie will start at 11 a.m. And following the film, we will adjourn to Mishka's. It will be at the Varsity. We will adjourn following the film to Mishka's Cafe next door to talk about the film. The purpose of doing this really is to get citizens involved. That's what democracy is all about. We need to talk about the ideas of the film, global warming, and it's especially opportune because California is about to make a decision on a very momentous process, which is hydrofracking throughout the state, going after very deep oil and natural gas. It's a decision that will affect us very strongly. And so it's an opportunity to think about what industry does to confuse the issue and direct government policy their way. Frankly, I don't think we can afford to keep profiting them. We cannot continue to run this country for their benefit.
That's a very strong message. Thank you for that.
Okay.
So if you want more information, please do contact Mary Sue, and for any activity or event or simply talking to her about these issues. And if you remember your email address, you can just say it here.
Yes, it is zbox@dcn.org. Zebra, boy, Oscar, X-ray @davidcharlesnancy.org. I will be more than glad to get you involved here in Davis or in the Bay Area, where we have groups extraordinarily active in using citizens' voices to run government for our benefit.
Thank you so much, Mary. And now I'd like to move to fracking. It's a very strange word. It is a contraction between hydraulic, I believe, and fracturing. And for a definition of this strange word, I'm going to go to RL. RL, are you there? Can you hear me? RL?
Hello, how are you?
Hi. RL, I'm going to start with you, if I may. Can you tell us what fracking is?
Sure. Fracking is short for hydraulic fracturing, which generally involves taking an existing oil well or gas well, if you prefer, and injecting a mixture of water, sand, and chemicals, many of which are toxic, underground. They will call it well stimulation. They will often, these days, branch so that you are not simply digging underground straight down, but you are branching out horizontally, sometimes for several miles, to extract oil and gas from the oil-bearing shale rock. That's generally what fracking is.
Aurel, is it true that California will be fracking mostly for oil and not for natural gas?
Yes. And that's one of the differences between California and the fracking that you hear about in Pennsylvania and New York. California is going to be fracked primarily for oil, and the oil that is existing in what's called the Monterey Shale Formation is very heavy, sour crude. It's very carbon intensive, which has the environmentalists and the climate advocates very concerned.
What are the implications to climate, global warming rather, and of this fracking for oil? Could you, I know you've done some original research on this topic, could you give us a synopsis or a short description of what the implications are for the environment?
Sure. To cut to the chase, the oil in California is roughly equivalent to the Keystone Pipeline. And the way that I came up with that conclusion is very simple. California has about 15 billion, that's billion with a B, barrels of oil that could be easily fracked using modern technology. For a couple of comparison numbers, there's a total of about 400 billion with a B barrels of oil in the state, but not all of that could be reached by modern fracking technology. And also as a comparison, it's roughly 4 times as much oil as in the Bakken Formation, B-A-K-K-E-N Formation in North Dakota. And it's roughly 2/3 of the oil existing within the continental United States. And for
so
a long
it is
time, California
yes.
has always had oil. If you've seen the movie There Will Be Blood. But for a long time, the wells were getting dried out, I guess I'd say. It's only now with modern fracking technology that people are realizing that the existing wells can be taken much deeper, and we can burn a great deal more carbon to get to that oil. So the research that I did was to look at what happens when you frack 15 billion barrels of oil and burn it. There's an EPA, there's a tool on the EPA website where you can check it out and find that for every barrel of oil, there is 0.43 metric tons of carbon pollution. And I did some very basic math and realized that fracking the California oil that we can get to would result in adding about 6.45 billion with a B tons of carbon to our atmosphere, which is already pretty badly overloaded. For comparison's sake, the website Skeptical Science, which I recommend very highly, skepticscience.org, I believe it is, states that the Keystone Pipeline will add about 7 billion, with a B, tons of carbon pollution over a 40-year lifespan. So if you do some very basic math, you realize that 6.45 billion tons is not much less than 7 billion tons. And so if we are going to oppose Keystone Pipeline, which I certainly do, we also need to be proactive regarding California fracking.
Thank you very much, Aurel. We'll come back to you a bit later in the interview about the bills that are now in front of the California legislature. But let me go to Seth now. And I want to ask you, Seth, I'm not sure if you have that from on top of your head, but how much fracking is going on now in California?
Thank you for having me. I'd be happy to answer that question. The short answer is we don't know. The Department of Gas and Geothermal Resources, otherwise known as DOGGR, they have not been collecting information on the location, the location of wells, the numbers of wells, how much water is used in these wells, etc. So the short answer is we don't know for sure. There is a voluntary industry website where drilling operators are able to post voluntarily where and when and how they've been hydraulically fracturing in California, which, I think that there's about 700 wells to date put on that website. It's probably a gross underestimate.
Well, that's very interesting. And so from what I understand, from what you said, Seth, then the state is not tracking the fracking in California at the moment.
Correct. Yes. DOGGR is not tracking to date. They may track in the near future. There are, to my knowledge, there are lawsuits that are working on getting them to start tracking the hydraulic fracturing and the shale oil and gas development in California.
Mm-hmm. But at the moment, it's the disclosures are on a voluntary basis at the moment from the industry doing the fracking, correct?
Correct.
And I'll stay with you, Seth. You are an environmentalist and a PhD and a Master of Public Health. And I wanted to ask you a slightly controversial question. Are the environmental and health concerns in California about tracking valid because they are based on data, or are they valid because they're based on the fear of what if?
Well, as a scientist who pays attention to the data, I would say that fears regarding the environmental health dimensions of hydraulic fracturing are evidence-based. There is plenty of evidence to suggest that hydraulically fracturing, especially hydraulically fracturing shale formations, opens up a very large industrial process that we've seen in other states, contributing to very large quantities of different types of air pollutants, including benzene, toluene, xylene, ethylbenzene, otherwise known as BTEX.
Methane as well?
Methane, although I can talk about methane as a health
hazard,
as a health hazard in a second, but also ozone, tropospheric ozone or ground level ozone, which we know in the Central Valley and the South Coast and Los Angeles quite well. It's otherwise known as smog. There's data on shale oil and gas development in other states as well, such as Wyoming, Utah, Texas. They've shown large upticks in the amount of ground level ozone driven by emissions from shale oil and gas. There's also concerns about drinking water.
Yes.
A lot of people are very concerned with contamination of groundwater from hydraulic fracturing. And there are data to suggest that, that this is a concern.
Yes. Well, I wanted to clarify a point, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So fracking, the way I understand it, is a two-step process. There is the injection of this power stream of water mixed with sand and chemicals, whether they're toxic or not, to break the rocks, and then the rocks will yield the gas or the oil. But then the second step is what comes out of this as a result of the drilling, and this is the contaminated or the water that has been fracking and is full of chemicals as well as other things we don't know, and that surface onto the earth and potentially contaminates the wells and the land. Am I understanding this correctly?
Well, let me just take a step back before I answer that question.
Okay.
And say that hydraulic fracturing in and of itself, I think when we talk about hydraulic fracturing, what we're really talking about is shale oil and gas development. We have been hydraulically fracturing in California, New York, Pennsylvania, Wyoming. We've been hydraulically fracturing wells, as RL indicated, since the 1940s, at least. What is new about the modern day hydraulic fracturing, which includes drilling long laterals through deeper formations.
As RL mentioned.
As RL mentioned.
The horizontal fracking.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So all of this put together constitutes shale oil and gas development. It really matters what everything that comes before and everything that comes after the enabling technology, which is hydraulic fracturing. So that includes all of the trucks that bring water to the fracking site. It should also be noted that traditional fracking that has gone on since the early 1900s in California was using, tens to maybe hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. Modern day hydraulic fracturing for shale oil and gas, these are much deeper formations, and because you have to drill so much farther down vertically and so far, as RL indicated, directionally through formations, there's a lot of space in that well to fill with fluids. So that means that we're using 1 to 5 million gallons of water, sand, and chemicals for modern day hydraulic fracturing. So to get back to your question,
yes,
don't want to get too far away from that. To get back to your question, putting this much water down a well, on average, what we've seen in other formations throughout the United States is about 25 to 65, 70% of this water, usually around 40 to 50% of the water, comes back up as flow back,
yes,
is what it's called, wastewater.
Yes.
So we have to do something with this. It not only has the chemicals that were put into the fracking fluid, which, as you indicated, a lot of them do have health dimensions to them. It also includes everything that is down in these shale layers. So it comes back up. It includes salts, heavy metals, and other constituents, depending on where you are.
Radioactive material, perhaps?
In certain shale plays, in certain parts of the country, and in certain parts of those shale plays, there are what are called naturally occurring radioactive materials, or norms.
Yes.
This is a big issue in the Marcellus shale play in Pennsylvania, New York, and West Virginia. But you have to do something with this water. And so you're either going to put it into sumps, which are basically big holes in the ground, and let it evaporate and then dispose of the solids, or you're going to take this water, you're going to truck it about 3,000 gallons per truck. So you can do the math. It's a lot of trucks for 1.5 million gallons of water.
A lot of gas emissions as well.
More diesel,
Yes.
particulate matter, nitrogen
right.
oxides, et cetera. And you're going to put it into underground injection wells.
Yeah. Well, this is a very interesting discussion, and of course we'll have your website on our television screen. So for more information, more in-depth information, please go there. But RL, I want to come back to you and talk a little bit about, now you are going to the Democratic Convention this month in Sacramento. What are your immediate goals that you will be bringing to the convention, and in particular to the Environmental Caucus about fracking?
The convention starts this Friday, and it goes through Sunday. I'll actually be getting into town on Thursday to stay with an old Davis classmate, since I'm a graduate of King Hall from many years ago. And the State Resolutions Committee will be considering at least one resolution dealing with fracking. There's a bit of a tangled history here, but the short answer is that I've been working very hard on a resolution that is known as the Goldman Resolution, named after its author, unlisted as a co-author, although he gets all the credit. We've been getting it passed up and down the state through Democratic states, county central committees, and local clubs, such as the ones that I'm the president of a club known as the Democratic Club of the Conejo Valley, for example. So we passed it, and the Ventura County Central Committee passed it. So what we want to do is get this strong resolution calling for a fracking moratorium, an indefinite fracking moratorium, passed by the State Resolutions Committee. And it's not because we want to get the state party on record, because I think resolutions can be
RL,
yes.
I'm very sorry for interrupting. I'm afraid I'm just about out of time. So
Okay.
we have to leave it there, but there'll be the appropriate links on our television screen if our viewers would like to know a little more. Thank you very much for being on our show today, Mary Sue, and of course Seth Shunkoff and R.L. Miller. Thank you so much for your dedication to our community, and of course all of you watching at home. Now, you can stream this episode online by going to davismedia.org, and while you're there, you can also check some of our other programs. You've been watching In the Studio, and I'm your host, Lynn Weaver. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.